Hello, yes, a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening to you, however you may be listening and wherever you may be listening. This is the latest edition of the Board Sports Media NFL podcast, coming to you once again on a Tuesday evening or a Wednesday morning, depending on when you listen to this. After what has been, again, as I always like to say, but until they prove me wrong, I'm going to have to keep introducing like this, a very eventful week in the National Football League with plenty to talk about, and we will be getting into that very, very soon. But first, we must do the admin for the show, which is as simple as thanking you very much for joining me and listening to me on this show. If you are new, don't forget you can like and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to this on. And don't forget you can also like and follow us on our social media platforms as well. We are at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. I just had to remember. Every week I promise myself I'm going to write these down, but I always keep forgetting. And then on Twitter, we are at MRB Sports Media. And then if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for making me just a little bit part of your week. I believe that's everything. Is that the usual intro? Yep. It feels as if it's been shorter than normal, but well, that's it. We get on with the show. And for our first topic tonight, I really do need to start off with, I need to go back to the beginning of the week and to Thursday Night Football, the Rams and the Vikings. Not so much about the game, but the main talking point coming out of it has been the final play, as it were. I don't think it was the final play. No, it wouldn't be because there was a couple of plays afterwards. But the controversy that surrounded the face mask or a lack of a face mask on Sam Darnold by the Los Angeles Rams that ended up being awarded as a safety and effectively killing the game for the Vikings and handing the Los Angeles Rams the win. Now, again, I don't want to get too much into that call specifically. It was wrong. Again, it cost the Vikings rather a pretty crucial win that could end up being very crucial in the in the NFC North standings and in the NFC picture overall. It needs to be said. But what I want to talk about is the idea of replay as a whole. And that is something that has been sort of coming along. And it gets brought up, I think, on a pretty much monthly basis. There was always a talk of, oh, this needs to be added to, potentially be reviewed. And, it always gets changed. We had the pass interference rule being able to be challenged a couple of years ago. That sort of went away because no one could quite work out exactly what it was meant to be doing. There will always be things of, oh, should that be open to review? I think the replay should be allowed for everything. If I'm being brutally honest, I think the amount of things that go on an NFL field, there will always be something that someone feels that they missed. Even with the amount of cameras that are on players at all times, there will always be something that coaches feel like they missed or the referees got wrong. And I think that everything should be up for review. Now, the fact that coaches, have the challenge flags and, we've limited to them, I think also helps the situation because if you gave the coaches an unlimited number of challenges, then it would just, be a bit of a free fall. They'd be able to challenge something on every play. Everyone says there's always holding on every play. Well, technically, if you gave coaches an unlimited amount of challenges, then, the offensive, or the defensive the team that's on defense rather would be able to just throw the flag and say there was holding on that play, go check it. Then the next play there was holding, go check it. And then controversy. There was a face mask call on that play, go check it. It would, and the game would go on for hours. But I think if you limit, as they do now, if you limit the amount of challenges that the coach can, you've already restricted what they can do. But if you just, again, open up to everything and even get rid of the whole, in the last 2 minutes, coaches challenges, or no, there are no coach challenges. They all come from they all come from upstairs, as the phrase goes. I think if you give the coach an extra challenge, but allow them to challenge everything, I think that would leave a lot of fans, a little bit happier because I just think that, as I said, there are so many things that will always get missed. You have to be able to leave some scope for coaches to challenge and make sure they get the right thing because you don't want them to go through their challenges and be right. I've always felt that, by the way, as an aside, I've always felt it weird that the coaches, even if they continue to be right with their, if they get the challenge right, they get the challenge back, but that's only they only get one back. If they keep being right, then that's on the referee. That's not on you to restrict them in that way. You should be able to, give them as many challenges as they want. If they keep being right and the refs keep being wrong, keep proving the refs wrong. Keep giving them challenges. But anyway, make everything reviewable, because then you don't have this situation. And again, I think coaches will be a little bit more lenient on it because they will always hold on to that challenge in their back pocket for a big play at the end of the game. And again, I get that there are some things that are, as we like to call, judgment calls. They aren't definitive. Was that pass interference? One person might say, "Oh yeah, that was just hand fighting." Another one would say that was definitely pass interference. So maybe there is some scope to maybe change the there's just one person's view of it. Maybe someone who's not refereeing the game specifically. Maybe it is someone from Fifth Avenue, I believe the call is where the league offices are. But still, I think make everything reviewable so that we don't get these calls, because that was in the last 2 minutes that should be something that is reviewed, but obviously because it's not something that is reviewed and it goes to the officials, maybe they don't want to check it. I think give everything up, give the coach that extra challenge so they can work with something in that final 2 minutes of the half or the final 2 minutes of the game, and make everything just double free to be double checked. Again, there will be some egregious challenges. Someone will for the sake of giving it for effectively for using a timeout, maybe they'll throw a challenge flag down just to maybe get the chance to talk to the referees, give their teams a break. Maybe they'll discuss, oh, maybe I won't challenge after, or just there will always be room for things to be exploited, but there's always room for things to be exploited right now. So it's not necessarily going to be drastically changing the face of the game, but I just think in light of that, make everything open to challenges and just see what they do. I mean, do it for a year, maybe 2 years, and if things really do get out of hand, then you can always bring it back. But I think, given that the challenges are in the hands of the coaches, I think with their seasons potentially on the line in some situations, everything should be allowed to be double checked, and they should have the power, to do that. And with that, we move on to our second topic of the week. And pretty much, I think I might be doing this every sort of 4 weeks. And just like I did at the end of week 4, I think I'm going to use this as a chance to pretty much eliminate a bunch of teams from what I believe is going to be playoff contention. Now, this is based on what they are doing now. There are a multitude of factors. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you have a losing record by the season, you are completely out of it. Is there maybe potential promise that you're showing? Have you had a bad starter? Maybe you're getting a key player back that could change things. So it's not necessarily just because you have a bad record you are out. I mean, that it is pretty much what it is going to be. But I did put a lot of thought into who necessarily does. There were a couple of teams with winning records or 500 records that I wanted to put in the season is done category, but I slightly resisted just for a multitude of reasons. But anyway, I'm just going to quickly rattle through and to give a couple of sentences. Now, there may be some teams that have crept in after I updated it week 4. There may be some teams that still stay the same, but let's go through it. The New York Jets, who I will be talking about more in depth later, I think you could probably count their season as done. Same for the Miami Dolphins, if I'm being brutally honest. I think with Tua Tagovailoa, this was a really tough one to put in, but I just think if that's the performance they're going to put in with Tua Tagovailoa back, and again, I hope he gets better, and I do expect him to do well. If that's what they're going to do, I'm just not 100% certain that they're going to be able to turn things around, which is a bit of a shame because it does mean that the AFC East is pretty much done at this point. Because I also put the New England Patriots in there as well. I think, showing some good promising signs rather, but I just think a little bit, not necessarily too little too late. We knew this was going to be a rebuilding project, and you are seeing the signs of it is still a long-term thing for the Patriots. The Las Vegas Raiders, I think I've put them in there as well until they get that quarterback situation sorted out. You are pretty much putting them. Their future quarterback is not on the roster, and that's always a pretty damning sign of where you are as a team in the league. The Cleveland Browns are in there as well. Again, very good win against the Baltimore Ravens. They do have Nick Chubb back, but I just do not trust Jameis Winston to turn around and give them, 6 or 7 wins by the end of the season. Again, 3, 4, yeah, I could see, but not enough for them to make a run into the playoffs. So I put the Cleveland Browns in there as well, despite their very impressive and, as a Steelers fan, a very much needed win. Jacksonville Jaguars, again, I just think this was probably their week to show us what they can do, turn things around, especially with the Jordan Love situation against the Packers, but end up losing the game. And I think, if you can't beat a team down to their, who's down to their backup quarterback, unless have a lot of stuff in the bank, then, and a lot of wins in the back, and you can afford to maybe drop a game. That's just not going to hurt. That's not going to help you. So the Jacksonville Jaguars are in there. The Tennessee Titans, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. Again, what is the quarterback situation there? I do think that Will Levis does have some promise for them, but is he a bona fide stud quarterback, franchise quarterback in the National Football League? I don't think so, if I'm being honest. But again, quarterbacks drive the league. I just don't see it there with the Titans. Based on their loss, again, one of those do or die turnaround season sort of performances or game potential moments for the New York Giants. I'm putting their season is over as well. Again, I do not have faith in Daniel Jones as one of the worst contracts that we have seen in the NFL. It's not the worst, but it's certainly one of the worst. And I just don't see a lot of a good defense, but offense. I just know there's a lot of good pieces, but I don't see it clicking for them. The New Orleans Saints, a bit of a surprise, given where they were the first couple of weeks of the season. Everyone talking about them being in the Super Bowl. Now they're 2-6, so a major turnaround. And similar sort of thing. I don't think their future quarterback is on the roster. So that's always as I said, it's always a telling sign. And as always, the Carolina Panthers, the garbage can, trash fire, dumpster fire, whatever phrase you want to use, of the National Football League. So they are, of course, going to be in there as well. Again, the fact that there's no NFC West teams in there, I think, is pretty stunning. I'm just going to look through this list. Has every division been represented the same? AFC East, AFC West, AFC North, AFC South, NFC East, South, NFC West. No NFC North teams in there as well. I think the who would be the Chicago Bears. I think again not quite over yet. Caleb Williams showing the struggling signs, but showing me a little bit of promise to make me think that again. I'm not putting them to be playoff contenders right now, so technically you could put them in this list because again I don't see them making the playoffs, but I'm not ruling them out just yet, especially if Caleb Williams just gets that extra, that extra 10%, that extra click to add a little bit more to his game, and then we'll see if we can take it from there. And with that, we take it to the quick. I always say it's quick, but it's the wraparound section of the podcast where I just go around the league, look at some of the scores, and to see what some of the big talking points are that we can bring from it. So the first one, I think it's probably the big story of the weekend, is obviously the Washington Commanders and their Hail Mary. Jaden Daniels, another great showing, a great moment in his rookie season. Really, really affirming his possibility to be the offensive rookie of the year. And obviously the Hail Mary. But most importantly, the thing that everyone really took away from it was the taunting before the play of Tyreek Stevenson, who was taunting the Commanders fans as if the game was over, and then he's the one who, as everyone said, made the mistake by tipping the ball in the Hail Mary to give the Washington Commanders the lead. But what I will say is I understand, I sort of understand why he's getting a lot of stick for this, but I think what we need to, he still made there. He still made it there and got his hand on the ball again. I don't think if he was, did you look at what he was able to do on the play? Go back and look at the footage. Do you think it would have made any difference if he was ready, turned around and ready for the play? He still is in a position to make a play, and he just decides that I don't think the taunting has anything to do with what he did there. Again, you can say that it was the wrong, he made a bad play on the ball. Absolutely, he did. But I don't think you should put it down to the fact, or put it wholly down to the fact that it was because he was, coming in late for him, taunting and, whatever. And they go look back at the play again. I think he's there. I think he makes the play regardless of what he's doing. So I don't think he necessarily deserves the amount of stick that he's been getting. I understand he's made an apology to Bears fans for what he did, but I don't think it's really that necessary because I think that play is happening the way it does regardless. So kudos to Jaden Daniels and the Commanders for what they did, but I don't think we should be scapegoating Tyreek Stevenson for his role in that. So just calm him down on him a little bit. Right, moving on to topic number 2 of section 3, as it were. The state of the New York Jets, which I saw touched on earlier. And I really want to go on, start off really as the talking point of Mike Greenberg and his rant that he gave on ESPN to Get Up, where he pretty much summed it up. Is that this may be, and I think he really is onto something, this may be the most disappointing franchise slash team slash season of anyone in the history of professional sports when you consider the hype that was surrounding them. We understand that teams have bad seasons, teams have good seasons, whatever. So that's fine. And the New York Jets as a whole have not been a well-run organization, have not been a functional organization for for a while. But when you do the things that you do and the way they do it and the order in which they did it as well, and you end up with a 2-6 record after 8 games, you deserve every bit of stick that you are going to get. I will admit I was never really too bought into the New York Jets. I never had them as a Super Bowl team. I always thought there was going to be something that would come up. I admittedly I was going to it was partly was going to be down to Aaron Rodgers' play rather than anything. When he's been good, not been his MVP former self, but he's not been a total disaster in terms of his play. But if we are to believe what has been going on, and that he's been pulling some of the strings behind the scenes, and the insistence on getting Devontae Adams into New York and all that sort of stuff off the field, Aaron Rodgers has ruined the New York Jets and arguably set them back a while as a franchise because they did everything to get him. If they didn't go and get Aaron Rodgers, then they may have drafted a quarterback in a couple of drafts ago. They may have stuck with Zach Wilson, who I think is bad, but give him another couple of years, he could have developed. A bit like Ryan Tannehill did when he went from the Dolphins to the Titans. Or indeed Aaron Rodgers, he was nothing in the league. I mean, he was a sit back. But after 3 or 4 years sitting behind something, bring in a couple of the veterans, bring in Joe Flacco. We've seen what he's been doing with the Colts and Browns, for instance. So there is a chance that Zach Wilson could have done something, but no, Zach Wilson went away. Everything was good on Aaron Rodgers. What do they do now for a quarterback? If they draft someone this summer or next summer rather, is he going to be someone that's going to be ready to play right away, or is he someone that's going to be, need a couple of years to get up to speed? So in effect, they have wasted 3, possibly 4, maybe even 5 years of, what is the prime of a very, very good defense. So again, Aaron Rodgers on the field, not been a total disaster, but off the field, they gave everything for him. Got rid of Robert Saleh again, kept Nathaniel Hackett, but to keep Aaron Rodgers happy, and it has come as that. Mike Greenberg said it absolutely right. Given the hype that was going on surrounding the New York Jets, this is the worst season I think of anyone in professional sports history. At least that I can think of off the top of my head. This will be nothing to US listeners, or well, not necessarily, but those of you who do not follow the sport of soccer. But Chelsea in Jose Mourinho's final year at Chelsea, the second time around, when they won the league and then ended up, I think they were 15th by the time they sacked him and then ended up mid-table. That's an argument, but again, this was Aaron Rodgers. This was meant to be all in. This was meant to be the savior. This was meant to be it for the Jet. Nothing. And again, all the moves that has been made around to suit Aaron Rodgers, it just hasn't worked, and they're paying the price for it. So yeah, Mike Greenberg's right. This is the worst season of any franchise in NFL history. Now, from one organization who was a dumpster fire for a while, was what the New York Jets are, but now seem to have sorted themselves around, the Detroit Lions. And their performance against the Tennessee Titans, winning 52-14, that's not really the story. The story to come out of it is that of Jared Goff, who had one of the weirder and, in a way, more impressive stat lines that you are ever going to see in the National Football League. It is really up there with, think of the Randy Moss one where it was three catches, 3 touchdowns, 163 yards, or, on the other end of the scale, the Jerome Bettis one where it's 5 rushes, 1 yard, 3 touchdowns. It's sort of along the same line. Jared Goff, with his team putting up 52 points, this is the stat line. 15 attempts, 12 completions, 85 yards, 80% completions percentage, 3 touchdowns. How do you throw 3 touchdowns and not even break 100 yards? That is incredible. And again, it was a great all-round team performance and everything. Defense and running game stepped up. I get that, but just as a quarterback, again as a standalone stat, 15 attempts, 12 completions, 85 yards, 3 touchdowns. He averaged 5.7 yards per throw. I think that's incredible. I think that is I think that's absolutely insane. So credit to Jared Goff for that, and again for putting up one of the more insane stat lines that you are ever going to see in NFL history. Moving on to another very good team, and a team who is number two on PFT's power rankings, which I thought was a bit surprised because they are the only team that's left undefeated in the league, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, who did not have the best of days against the Las Vegas Raiders, but still managed to win, still 7-0 and what have you. And that leads me to think that I think they are destined to win the Super Bowl, if I'm being honest. 7-0. And what was the one thing that held them back, or held them back for a large part of last season? It was the wide receivers. Early on in the season, we had that rather ridiculous game against Detroit with the opening game of the season where they just couldn't catch a cold, as the saying goes. Now they've got adequate, more than adequate weapons, and they've added DeAndre Hopkins. Really stayed the same across the rest of the team. They are playing like that, and DeAndre Hopkins is only going to get better in this Andy Reid system. So where do they go from here? It's not down. It can only be up. I think we really do need to have the conversation of whether or not the Kansas City Chiefs could go unbeaten in this league. Not just the three-peat, which I think they are on course for, but can they do it a three-peat and do it unbeaten? I genuinely think we need to start having that discussion because again, who is stopping them if they keep playing like this and if they are only going to get better with the personnel that they have? Moving on to two bits of news out of the AFC South. Stephon Diggs being ruled out for the season for the Houston Texans. I think that's a pretty damaging blow. I think the Houston Texans are probably a team maybe thought they were going to be in AFC Championship contender. I don't think Super Bowl contention just yet. I think they're still 1 or 2 years away from that. But certainly, I think many people had them going deep into the playoffs after what they did last year. Now to lose someone like Stephon Diggs, a very, very key piece to that offense and someone who, in a big game, in a big moment, can come up trumps for you and be, a key player in a playoff game. Now that he's not going to be there, if they do make it, which I think they will, but if they do make it, that's going to be crucial for them. A bit like when I said that the Detroit Lions may have lost the Super Bowl by virtue of losing Aiden Hutchinson. I think whatever small hope the Houston Texans had of reaching the Super Bowl, I think that went away with losing Stephon Diggs. Now, hopefully he is able to come back and be a key piece for them next year. But in terms of this year, I think that's them pretty much over and done with. And now the last bit of news out of the AFC South and the last in this wrap up is the news that came out today in that the Indianapolis Colts are benching Anthony Richardson. And they will be going with Joe Flacco at least for the foreseeable future. Now I know there was some, criticism of Anthony Richardson, the fact that he took a play off because he was feeling out of juice or whatever. I don't want to take issue with that necessarily, but the idea of benching a young quarterback like this early in his career, I'm not really a fan of it. I think I spoke a couple of weeks ago about the Carolina Panthers and Bryce Young. I felt that you play him, you don't bench him for Andy Dalton. You play him, hope that he gets better. But if he doesn't, then you can still go and draft someone further down the line. But at least you still have the element of hope. I think it's the same for Anthony Richardson as well. I was never a big fan of him coming out. I don't think he was. I don't think he should have been a first round quarterback, or at least that early in the first round quarterback. He should have maybe been a late first, early second round backup to start up rather than going with his development, just because of how erratic he was at times coming out of Florida. So I think he's someone that he should be learning and developing by playing rather than sitting and watching again. Now I know I've made the point that we maybe are throwing too many quarterbacks into the deep end, but I think someone like Andy Richardson does have the potential to learn on the job. I think Michael Penix, I think, is someone who I think is right to be sitting behind Kirk Cousins in Atlanta. But I think Anthony Richardson has enough raw potential in him that you want to see and have him get better by giving him live reps. So I don't agree with what the Indianapolis Colts have done here, and again, it sort of put a pause on what's gonna happen for them. Yeah, and it's gonna have to pay dividends. Year 3, year 4, they have to be within Super Bowl, no, not necessarily Super Bowl, but playoff contention for this to have worked. I said I don't agree with them benching him this early, mainly because also what's that going to do to his confidence as well moving forward? The Colts are that trigger happy to just put him onto the bench. I definitely don't agree with it. And on to the final bit of news, and away from the National Football League, I want to talk about basketball and not anything that's happened on the court. This happened off the court, and it's the Dwayne Wade statue. Dwayne Wade, I do not follow basketball very, very closely. I keep it sort of arm's length. I know the big stories, I know the big names. And 10, 15 years ago, I knew all about the Miami Heat and the Dream Team and whatever that they put together with LeBron James and Chris Bosh or whatever. So I know what Dwayne Wade means to Miami, to the city of Miami, to the Heat and whatever. But the statue that the Miami Heat created for him, absolute shambles. What I don't get, again, this is partly about the Dwayne Wade. We are in 2024. How have we not got to the stage where statues look like the people they are meant to represent? I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If you haven't, I urge you go. But look at the busts that are there. They are far, far better at what you get in your standard statue that goes on. And again, I Dwayne Wade must have had some say in what was going on with the statue. It wasn't as if he just showed up and all of a sudden they're giving him a statue and he just happens to turn up to you. He knows he's getting a statue. He knows they're honoring him. Surely he or someone at the Heat or whoever's making the statue should say, "Hey, we're making a statue. What sort of face do you want on it? Okay, do you mind sitting down so we can sculpt you for it?" A bit like they do with the bus at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Why is it this hard to get a statue that looks like the person that we are honoring? I just don't get it, and it sort of diminishes the whole. It diminishes the legacy because people are going to look at, and it doesn't look anything like him. I get there's something to it because he's doing it in a screaming mode, so maybe it would have been a little bit harder. But just in general, statues in general, can we start making them look a little bit, or really a lot better than what we are producing for these great athletes? And this goes beyond sports as well. In whatever walk of life, let's start getting better statues so that people don't have to constantly, because that was all the reaction was it looks nothing like him. Wouldn't it be great for people to be talking about the statue as a whole and what it means rather than just the face at the end, and everyone talking about that as a result? Let's get statues better, people. Right. That is it for this show. I want to thank you very much for listening along. And as always, I end the show as I start. And that's as simple as saying thank you very much for listening. Don't forget, if you're new, follow us and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you are listening to. And then don't forget to follow us on our social medias, which are at MRB Sports Media on Twitter and at Baldwin Sports Media on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. And if you are a returning listener, then as always, thank you very much for joining me and making me a part of your week. That is it for the end of the show. I shall be back next week with plenty more NFL talk and hopefully plenty more headlines and hopefully no statues to, well, if we're talking about a statue, hopefully it'll be a good one. But until next week, take care. And as always, stay safe.